This is the Ramana Maharshi satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Now, our talk this week is from Talk 157. I'm reviewing and commenting on the books Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. And here, let's go into the dialogue. The disciple asks, in the quest of I, the seeker is, at a certain stage, directed to keep the mind in a negative attitude for grace to enter. How can a negative yield positive results? Maharshi, the self is always there, not to be newly got. Devotee, I mean to ask, what has been done in the negative attitude to deserve the grace? Maharshi, are you asking this question without grace? Grace is in the beginning, middle, and end. Grace is the self. Because of the false identification of the self with the body, the guru is considered to be with body. But from the guru's outlook, the guru is only the self. The self is one only. He tells that the self alone is. Is not then the self your guru? Where else will grace come from? It is from the self alone. Manifestations of the self is a manifestation of grace, and vice versa. All these doubts arise because of the wrong outlook and consequent expectations of things external to oneself. Nothing is external to the self. Devotee, all our questions are from our standpoint, and Sri Bhagavan's replies are from his standpoint. The questions are not only answered, but are also undermined. Now, this dialogue provides a deep insight into the concept of grace and the nature of the self, according to Ramana Maharshi's teachings. The seeker is asking about the process of seeking the self and how a negative attitude can lead to a positive result through grace. When he mentions maintaining a negative attitude, he's not referring to being pessimistic or having a cynical outlook. Instead, he's talking about a specific mindset or mental state that involves self-inquiry and detachment. Maintaining a negative attitude in this context means focusing on negating or letting go of identification with the ego and objects of the external world. It's about turning attention inward, away from the egoic I and the things of the world, in order to realize the true nature of the self. It's a way of emptying the mind of concepts, attachments, and false identifications to uncover the unchanging, eternal self. Ramana teaches that the self is obscured by these misidentifications with the body, mind, and external world. Self-realization is not adding anything new, it's more of removing the obscurations. This negation is a key aspect of the practice of self-inquiry, where you keep directing attention towards your sense of identity, asking, "Who am I?" and negating any idea of identity that comes and goes. This peels away the layers of egoic identification and leads to the realization of your true self. It's a form of self-investigation and inner renunciation that is central to Ramana's teachings. Let's review the dialogue. The seeker is puzzled about how maintaining a negative attitude can lead to the positive experience of grace. Ramana clarifies that the self is always present and doesn't need to be acquired anew. Grace is not something to be earned. It's already within, in the form of the self. The negative attitude is about removing what obscures your view of the self. Ramana emphasizes that grace is not something separate or external. It is the self itself. Grace exists from the beginning to the end of your spiritual journey. It's not dependent on your actions or merits, but is an inherent aspect of the self. Maharshi explains that the Guru, from the standpoint of the self, is not separate. The self is one, and the Guru is the self. The self is the true Guru, and grace comes from the self. Ramana then says that doubts come due to a mistaken outlook that separates the imagined individual from apparently external entities. In reality, nothing is external to the self. The seeker's questions come from a limited egoic perspective, while Sri Bhagavan's response are from the standpoint of the self. So, to really know what Ramana is saying, you must stand as the self. So, inquire, know yourself, and be always free and at peace. And now we have a video with a talk from Nome, Steady Knowledge of Yourself.
The indestructibility of the knowledge of truth lies in our identity with it. The truth, which is being, existence itself, is innately imperishable. It is unborn or uncreated, and it never comes to an end. Our identity with that is the essential knowledge. When I say our identity, I mean it only loosely. For there is no power or multiplicity in the real self. Multiplicity is only imagined, a product of delusion, while existence itself is indivisible. If there is ignorance prevailing regarding that existence, the real self, then we may imagine the very same thing as many. If we are more spiritually inclined, we will think of one being in the many. If we take a still higher view, we will think of many in the one. But if we know ourselves as we are, it is indivisible. Just one self, one existence, which is simultaneously of the nature of perfect bliss and consciousness. The knowledge of identity, of what we are, is what is essential. So the Maharshi's instruction is consistently one of self-knowledge. And the advice for spiritual practice is to deeply inquire as to, within yourself, who am I? If we misidentify or become attached to that which is perishing, that which is mutable, then the steadiness of knowledge of the self or self-realization will seem elusive. We will connect that which is innate with some bodily state or some mental state. But if we know ourselves as we are, beyond what is changeful, transcendent over definition by the body, by the mind, or even as an individual entity or ego, then we find the realization, the knowledge of truth, innately steady. Knowledge of the truth, therefore, or of the Absolute, is really knowledge of yourself. How could one not know himself? Is there some distance, some chasm between yourself and yourself? Sri Bhagavan says, are there two selves, one to know another? Again he says, I know myself, I do not know myself. Both statements are a matter for laughter. If there is the conception, yet I don't see myself. I listen to this, but I don't know myself as I am. I don't know myself as that. Inquire as to what is the nature of this I who does not know. Is that I a body? Is the I thoughts? Who is it that it says, I experience or I know a body, my thoughts, the world, and such? If you go on inquiring like this deeply within yourself, the misidentification with what is unreal ceases. Even individuality itself, the notion, I am some kind of ego, some kind of entity, to which all the other definitions are appended. Even that, being unreal, vanishes. What remains is perpetual existence, which is unborn and which does not have an end. That is what you are. The silent abidance in your true nature is the entire teaching. All other explanations are merely auxiliary argument.
So now we're going to have a few minutes to inquire ourselves. Notice that you exist, and you know that you exist without feeling it or thinking it. You just know. Now inquire, investigate within yourself. What does it mean to maintain a negative attitude in spiritual practice, to discriminate and negate what is not the self? Is anything truly external to the self? Do I need to earn grace, or is it just there? Are grace and the self different from each other? Who am I? What actually exists, and what is the nature of my existence? All right. And our chant. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Well, I think it was interesting that Ramana made the connection that grace is the self, and that grace is not something that you need to earn.
Yeah, I have found that when I'm clear and direct on where I'm going, then I can recognize when grace comes in. It's not that it wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm going from point A to point B, but I'm not sure, maybe it's point C, then then, I don't want to say grace gets confused and says, make up your mind, but, but Yeah, if your eye's not on the ball, then you'll miss you. It'll be there, but
Mm-hmm.
you won't resonate with what's
Mm-hmm.
there. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just my own sort of musings about it.
Uh-huh. But I think that's right, that certainly that's what Ramana says, that it's always there. And if we miss it, it's just due to our inadvertence. We're looking some other place.
Right. Because I just think, when I went from Albuquerque to San Francisco with my trailer, and I needed a piece of wire to keep a trailer on the truck. If I had been headed somewhere else, and that wire wouldn't have meant anything to me, I wouldn't even have noticed it. But because this was my intention, then that just, there it was, like this little miracle, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
that seems to happen a lot,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm clear about my direction.
Well, it's like when you're clear about your direction, then these diverting thoughts kind of settle down.
Yeah, they do.
And when that happens, then what is there is what's always been there. That's one of the things I love about the teaching is the idea that what we're looking for is something that we have always been, but just overlook. And I think, Ramana says and Nome says the reason for this overlooking are really our vasanas, our tendencies. And our tendencies control how we see the world and ourself and all of that stuff. And to see what's really there, we just have to let go of our own projections.
Yeah. And our interests in what's going on over there and over
Mm-hmm.
there and over there.
Uh-huh. But what over there, you might ask? Where is over
Yeah,
there?
that's true.
I've heard in some of the talks by Michael James.
Yes.
He says just when we look out, that's ego,
Yes.
and when we look in, there's no ego. It's gone. It's just
Yes.
so it's like the teaching is so simple,
Mm-hmm.
just to attend to yourself and not go out.
Mm-hmm.
It's so simple, but we keep going out.
That's right.
Uh-huh. We think somehow it's going to make us happy.
Yeah.
And you'd think by now we should catch on, but it's deep-seated.
Yeah, it seems like we still need another big kick in the butt.
Uh-huh. I think that's what
That,
we hope will happen from our practice.
Yeah, yeah,
and grace is also can bring you a big kick in the butt.
Yes.
yeah.
That's what's going to get you on further on down the road to
Right.
where you need to go.
Right.
Mhm.
And again, I think it's important the idea that grace is not something we do.
Mm-mm.
There's no we.
Yes, there's no do. So both sides of that are negated.
Hmm.
And I personally wish that negating things were as easy as saying not this, not this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it seems like the ideas are fairly firmly entrenched in my head, so I have to go slower.
Hmm.
And again, you'd think by now that I would realize that everything from the senses and mind just comes and goes, and it comes and goes in the midst of something that's always there.
Yeah.
And since I know about this, you would think that I might realize it, but no, it's not so easy. You know, I think maybe I hate to admit it, but I need to do what Nome did and go Vasana hunting.
Hmm. Yeah. And maybe Vasana hunting is a Vasana.
Maybe. But if you get to the end of them,
Yeah, like that's going to happen.
well, we know that it has happened with someone we know,
That's true.
because that was Nome's main practice. And, you know, the one thing he teaches that's different from what Ramana teaches is his specific stuff about vasanas, that vasanas are based on misidentifications and in a mistake in the idea of the source of happiness that's associated with it. And I think, you know, this is from Nomi's own practice. You know, so of course what he teaches is what was his own experience. You know, what else can you do?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it looks like Evelyn is interacting with the plumber. And now that things are getting deep, we should break off, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Good
Thank
to see
you.
These videos help bring Ramana Maharshi's teachings into your direct experience. Subscribe now